Hello, I will teach you how to make product visualization scenes like this using Blender and Unreal Engine. First, we are going to start in Blender. We will make all the models, set up our materials, and render out a few stills. Then we will send our scene to Unreal Engine to render a video using Lumen Lighting. If you'd like to skip the modeling part in Blender, you can find the files in the description below and follow along using Unreal Engine. Alright, let's get started. I'm going to select everything by pressing the A key, then deleting it. Now I'm going to add a cube. Now I'm going to go to the items panel. You can either press the N key on your keyboard or the top right arrow in the viewport. I'm going to change the dimensions of the cube with 10 centimeters in the z-axis and 3 centimeters in both x and y. These are approximately the real world scale values of this product, so that's why I'm using them. You can press full stop on the numpad to focus on it. Press 1 on the numpad to go into front view. Press G to move the object and Z to lock in the z-axis and move it up slightly. If you want to follow along, you can find the exact same files I'm using in the description below. I'm going to bring in the reference file. I'm going to drag it and drop it in. If dragging and dropping it in doesn't work for you, you can go into Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and search for images as plain and enable this add-on. And then once you drag and drop the image inside of Blender, it will work. Go into front view first, then drag and drop the image inside, and then align it to our model. You can press G to move the image around, and you can press S to scale it down or up if you want. Now I'm going to go back into solid view and then I'm going to delete our object. Add a cylinder and then change the vertices in the bottom left to 16. Now you can zoom out and scale it down to match the reference photo. Now that I have it matched to the reference photo, I'm going to move the reference photo slightly behind. We're going to go into edit mode by pressing the tab key, and then we're going to select the top vertices and start modeling it. First we're going to move them up slightly, and then we're going to press E to extrude and then scale S to scale down. Now I'm going to press Control R to add a loop cut, and then I'm going to click and then scale it up. I'm going to select the top edge by holding down Alt and then extrude it up by pressing E. I'm going to extrude it again, but hit the right mouse button and then scale it up. I'm going to extrude it up and then extrude it again and hit the right mouse button and then scale it down. Then extrude it up, extrude it again, the right mouse button, scale it down, extrude it up, extrude it again, right mouse button, scale it down, extrude it up. Now we're going to go into the modifiers and add the subdivision surface modifier. And now we're gonna right click and set the shading to auto smooth. As you can see, when we add the subdivision modifier, it looks weird, so we can add a loop cut and bring it down. When we bring down the loop cuts near each other, they become more of a harder edge. We can select the bottom face and press I to inset. Now I'm gonna hold down Alt and click on the loop and move it in the Z axis slightly. I'm gonna slightly change the scaling of the bottom face. I'm going to select this loop and scale it up. I'm adding another loop cut here. Now I'm just adding loop cuts to tighten up the model. As you can see, you can follow along and add the loop cuts where I'm adding them. It's Control R to add loop cuts. As you can see, as we move our camera, the camera is clipping into the model. We can go on the right hand side and click on the View tab and slightly reduce the clip start. Now I'm going to select the top face and then delete it. I'm going to add the solidify modifier onto this model and change the thickness value. Press Shift A and add a cylinder. Make sure its vertices is also 16. Now scale it down. We're going to make the top using this cylinder now. I'm going to go back into the bottle, select the top vertices and slightly bring them up a bit inside the cap. Go into edit mode and bring down the top vertices. I'm going to make this top a little more smoother than the one in the reference photo. I think that will look better. Press Shift A and add a UV sphere. Make sure the segments are 16 and the rings are 8. Now scale down the sphere to match the reference photo and align it to the top of the tip in the reference photo. Go into wireframe and edit mode, select these vertices, leave the ones that are in the middle of the sphere and delete them. Now select the vertices at the bottom and extrude them downwards. What we're going to do now is go into the snapping options and change it to vertex and then enable snapping. Now when we grab these vertices and lock them in the z-axis, and they will snap to these vertices. Now we can disable snapping again. Now I'm gonna select the top face and delete it. Select the edges and extrude them, right click and then scale them down and bring them as close as you can. Select the top model and hold down Shift and then select the bottom model and then press Ctrl J to join the objects. As you can see, the vertices aren't joined yet, so press A to select everything, then M to merge, and then select by distance, and then go into merge distance and then increase the merge distance by 1, and you can see at the bottom it says remove 16 vertices. Now they are connected together. Set the shading to smooth and add the subdivision modifier. Now in edit mode, we're going to add loop cuts to sharpen our model. We're going to change the shading from auto smooth to just smooth. We're going to select the bottom face to inset, and if you can't select it, you can go into wireframe and find the face there, and then you can inset it. Press I to inset. Now we're going to make the label, so select the bottle, go into edit mode, hold down Alt and click on the edge to select the entire loop of faces, and then hit Shift D to duplicate them, and then right click to reset the position, and then hit P to separate the object. Go into edit mode of the new object you created, slightly scale it up, and then change the smoothing to auto smooth. I'm going to scale it down on the Z axis slightly. And since we duplicated it, it's going to have the solidify modifier on it. So we're going to remove that modifier. And our modeling of the product is now complete. Select the label object and go into materials, create a new material, name it label. If we change the base color, you can see it's not changing because we're in solid view. If we go into material preview, you can see now the color is updating. You can make your own labels using Photoshop or using a website like Canva. Here, if you go into labels, you can see there are various options you can choose from. We're just going to choose the option that looks good. This one looks good, so I'm going to select that, and you can edit it here. Then once you're finished editing, you can go in the top right, hit share and download. You can change the file type to JPEG or PNG and download it. I've already downloaded it. You can also use the same one I'm using if you don't want to make it yourself. It's in the files below. Select the label model and go into the shading tab. You can press full stop on the numpad to zoom in. Find your label image, drag and drop it into the material editor like this and hook it up to the base color, and you will see that it shows up. Since it's not matching up how we want it, we're going to go into UV editing and adjust the UV so it fits better. We're going to go into Edge Select and go into Front View and then into Wireframe and select the edge that's in the center through Wireframe, so we can also select the one that's at the back. Now we're going to select that one, hit right click and then mark as seam. Press A to select everything, then press U and select Unwrap. Now on the left, we're gonna press A to select everything and then R to rotate it. As you can see, it's adjusting, rotate it in the right direction and then move it into the center. Scale up the UVs so they fit everything better and then adjust the position. The letters look a bit stretched, so I'm going to scale the UVs up in the Y axis so they look a little better. Now go back into shading and select the bottle. We're going to make the material for the bottle now. Hit new. It's the same thing as going into materials and pressing new there. So hit new to make a new material. Rename the material to black glass. Change the base color to black and reduce the roughness to 0.05. Now our bottle has a black glass material, but we want to change the material of this edge. Go back to layout, and in edit mode, we're going to select the faces that we want to change the material on. In wireframe, I'm going to select the edges. It selected a few more vertices than I wanted. So I'm going to go into face mode and then hold down Shift and Alt and then click on this edge to remove that. Now on the right in the materials panel, hit the plus icon to add a new material to this object and hit new. Rename the new material to plastic. So in the material preview, we can see that the material hasn't changed. So while we have those faces selected, we're going to hit the assign button and that will assign our new material to these faces. You can see there's a bit of white where we don't want it. So we're going to adjust that. What we're going to do is get this loop and assign it back to the black glass. That makes it look better. Now for the plastic material, we're going to select that and change the color to a much darker color like this. Now select the top object and add a new material. We're going to change the color to a darker color and set the metallic value to 1. Change the color so it's not too dark. And I'm going to set the roughness to 0.3. Now I'm going to change the material for the top part, so I'm going to hold down Alt to select these edges. If you can't see the faces properly, you can click this button in the subdivision modifier to see them better and select these faces. Now in wireframe mode and in vertex select, I'm going to select all of these so we have a selection of our top part. In our material tab, I'm going to add a new material and assign it to this. I'm going to create a new material and name it rubber. Change it to a black color and set the roughness to 0.8. I don't like how it looks here, so I'm gonna select this loop and assign it to the other material. That looks better. Now in the metal material, I'm gonna change the roughness to 0.15 and make the color much lighter. Now we're done with the reference image, so you can delete that. I'm going to adjust the position of the cap so it looks better to me. Now I'm going to rename our model, select the label model and name it label. Select the cap model and rename it to cap. And finally, we're going to rename our bottle to bottle. Select the cap and then hold down Shift and then select the bottle. Press Ctrl and P to parent the cap to the bottle. What that allows us to do is if we move the bottle, the cap will follow it. Select the label and then Shift select bottle and then Ctrl P to parent that also to the bottle. If we move the bottle, all of the objects will follow it, but we can also individually move the objects. Now we're going to make the background, so press Shift A, add a plane and scale it down. Now add a camera, so Control A and select camera. We're going to hit Alt and R to reset the rotation. Now press 3 on the numpad to go into side view. Press R to rotate the camera. You can hold down Control to rotate it in increments or just type in -90. Now move the camera on the y-axis. You can press 0 on the numpad to go in and out of the camera view. If you click and drag on the edge of the viewport, you can split it into another one. Click over here to remove the gizmo. You can press N and then T to remove the side panels. Go into camera view. Now on the right in our output settings, we can change the resolution so our camera is vertical. Swap over the top and bottom settings to make them vertical. Now we're going to select the camera and move it into a better position. Go into the camera settings on the right and change your focal length to 120 and then position your camera for a better view. Select the plane, hit tab to go into edit mode, press E to extrude it up. Go into face select and then delete this face. Now just the camera again. Now I'm going to move the bottle for better composition. Go into edge select and select this edge and move it down. Make sure you're in object mode and not in edit mode like me. Hit Shift A to add a cylinder and set the vertices to 64. I was in edit mode and that's why I had to delete it. Now scale down your cylinder. Right click and set the shading to auto smooth. I'm going to position the cylinder like this and then go into edit mode and select the top face and bring it down a little bit. Now I'm going to move the bottle up so it's resting on the cylinder. Now select your background object and go into side view by hitting numpad 3 and then go into edit mode wireframe, and I'm going to add some loop cuts like this. You can hold on Alt to select a loop and then hold on Alt plus Shift and then click on the other one to select both of them and then move them on the Y-axis. Now I'm going to add another loop cut, but you can see since our model is slightly lower on one side, the loop cut is also tilted. So what we're looking for is the top one. We're going to align the top line. I'm going to select our loop G and Z to move it on the Z axis. Now I'm going to add another loop cut like this. Now in solid view, I'm going to select the face that's on the left of the bottle and delete it. I'm going to hold down Alt and select this loop and then hold on Shift and Alt to select the other parts and then move it up. I'm going to go into edit mode and slightly adjust these edges. Now in the left viewport panel, I'm going to go into rendered view. Since by default we're in EV on the right in render settings, I'm going to change it from EV to cycles, and I'm going to change our device from CPU to GPU. Now in object mode, I'm going to add a light, an area light. I'm going to go into front view and then rotate it 90 degrees and position it outside of the cutout we just made and scale it down. I'm going to position the light a little bit better. Now select the light, and on the right in the light settings, I'm going to change the power value to 2. Now I'm going to select the background, and in modifiers, I'm going to add a solidify modifier. Now I'm going to select the even thickness and then change the offset from -1 to 1 and change the thickness to 0.2. I'm actually going to set the thickness to 0.25. I think that looks better. Adjust the light again. Now select the cylinder and go into modifiers, add a bevel modifier. Change the segment count, and the shading doesn't look right, so we're going to change it to smooth and then adjust the segments to 4. I'm going to set the amount to 0.02. In the render settings on viewport, I'm going to enable denoise. I'm going to change the amount on the bevel to 0.03 now. Now select the background and add a bevel modifier to that as well. Change the shading to smooth and set the segments to 4 and amount to 0.01. Now select the background object and go into materials. Hit the new button to create a new material for it. Now I'm going to go into the modifiers and apply the solidify modifier. Now in edit mode, I'm going to press A to select everything and then U and then select cube projection. You can find textures online on websites like Polyhaven or Megascans. I'm going to be using a material from Polyhaven. If you find a material you like, you can select it and download it. You can change the format as well. I'll select Blender and download the material. This material will be included in my project files below. You can open up the downloaded material and there will be a Blender file inside it. You can open that. All you have to do is select this sphere and Control C to copy it, and then come into your own project and Control V to paste it. Now you can even delete the sphere or move it out of the way if you like. In material preview, you can see there's already a material applied to the sphere. Select your background object, and in the drop down here in the materials panel, you can select the new material. I'll also apply it to our cylinder. As you can see, the material on both objects isn't of the same scale, so we're going to have to adjust that. Select your background object and then go into the UV editing tab. On the left, press A to select everything and you can scale it. See, if we scale it down, you can see the material becomes more zoomed in, and if you scale it up, it zooms out. I'm going to scale it up by a value of 3. I think that looks good. Select the background object and go into shading. I'm going to adjust the colors of the model. Press 0 on numpad to go into camera view and go into render view. I'm going to modify the colors of this material. You can see the base color here. Hit Shift A and click on search. Search for hue and saturation. I'm going to change my hue value to 0.46 and I'm going to change my saturation to 0.5. I'm going to select the light and slightly adjust the values. I'm going to set the power to 3. I think that looks good. Now I'm going to add a branch model. You can find them online on websites like Sketchfab. The one I'm going to be using will be included in the files below. If you find a model you like, you can click on it, and on the bottom left, it may have a download 3D model button. You can use that to download it and follow along, or you can use the model that I have provided. Once you have the model, you can go into File, Import, and select whatever file type it was. Select the model and import FBX. Now that the model is imported, I'm going to change its location. And I'm also going to rotate the model. That way it looks better, I think, in my opinion. You can also scale it up, and you don't have to match what I'm doing exactly. You can do whatever you like. There, I think that looks good for now. I'm going to delete the sphere that we had because we don't need it any longer. Shift A, empty, plane axis. We're going to use this as our focus point on our camera. I'm going to scale it down and move it at the center of the bottle. Select the camera and go into the camera settings on the right. Go into depth of field, enable it, and then click on this eyedropper and select our empty object. Now we have depth of field in our scene, as you can see. We're going to go into our camera view and change our f-stop. That changes the amount of blur we have on our depth of field. I think a value of 6 looks good. Now go into render settings, scroll all the way down to color management, and in color management you can change the look to high contrast. In render settings, I'm going to change the samples to 512. Now we can go into render and click on render image, and it will begin rendering our image. I think the depth of field is a little too much on this render, so I'm going to change the settings. I'm going to select the camera, go back into camera settings, and I'm going to change the f-stop to 15. Now I'm going to render it out to see how it looks. Okay, this looks much better. If you want to save the image, click on Image and Save As. I'm going to go into Output Settings and change the percentage to 200. That will make our image 4K. I'm going to hit Render and let the image render out. And now we have our 4K render completed. Now we're going to prepare our scene to be exported to Unreal Engine. Select the cylinder. You can go up and reset its location either by entering 0 here, or you can just press Alt G. I'm going to do the same to the bottle. I'm also going to reset the location for the tree branch. Select the cap, shift select the label, and shift select the bottle. Make sure they're all selected. Go into File, Export FBX. Select the location where you'd like to export your models. On the right, select Object Types Mesh and limit to selected objects. I'm going to rename it to Bottle. To export textures as well, change the path mode to Copy and hit this button next to it. And then just hit Export FBX. Now select the cylinder, File, Export FBX. The setting should be already selected. Just rename it. I named it Base and Export FBX. We're going to do the same thing with our background and name it Background. Select your branch as well, File, Export FBX and rename it to Branch. Now we have exported all our models. Create a new Unreal Engine project, go into Games, Blank, and rename the project. I'm going to name it Product Render. You can also enable ray tracing if you have a valid graphics card that can support it, and hit Create. Alright, so now go into File, New Level, and select the empty level and create it. You can go in the bottom left and click on the content drawer or hit Control and spacebar to open it. We're going to make a new folder called Assets and another folder inside of that called Mesh. Find the models you exported. Mine are in the export folder. Grab bottle and drag it inside of the content drawer and let go. A new window will open. In this, what we're going to do is change the import uniform scale to 10 because lumen lighting cannot handle very small scenes. We have our bottle imported in 3 separate objects. I'm going to drag all 3 objects inside. Now hit this arrow besides location to recenter it. Go into File, Save All, into Assets, make a new folder called Maps, and rename this to Render Scene or whatever you'd like. Now hit Save. I'm going to tidy some things up in the content drawer. I'll make a new folder called Materials. I'm going to take all of the materials that came with the model and drag them into that folder. I'll make another folder, call it Textures, and drag the texture that came with it inside of there. I'm going to double click the bottle and open it up. I'm going to double click the black glass material. Inside here, I'm going to hold down 1 and click. I'm going to set the value to 0.05 and plug this into roughness. Save the material and close it. Now open up the plastic material. Hold down 1 and click. Set the value to 0.4 and plug it into roughness. Now I'm going to open up the bottle cap. Go into material. This should be the metal material, so hold on 1, click, set the value to 1, plug it into metallic. Add another one, set the value to 0.15 and plug that into roughness. Now for the rubber material, open that up, hold down 1, click and enter the value 0.8 and plug it into roughness. Now I'm going to bring in the base cylinder that we had, drag that in. The settings should already be applied. Make sure it's still 10 and hit import. With the base, the material didn't come in properly, so we're gonna have to set that up. Open the material. I'm going to select all of these textures and delete them. Content drawer, I'll also delete them from here as well. Find where the texture was originally located. It was in this folder. Go into the textures folder and drag all of these textures inside of Unreal. I'm going to move the textures into the texture folder and the material into the materials folder. Now open up that material. Find the textures you just imported and drag them inside of our material. This purple material into the normal map. Plug in the brown one into color. And when you select this one, you can see that it says rough. So this goes into roughness. The other one is displacement. We won't be using that one. Hit save and close the material. Now I'm going to drag the base into our world and reset its location as well. Now I'm going to drag in the background. In this, I'm going to change the material import method to do not create material because we're using the same material that's on our base, and deselect import textures. We're going to open the model and select the material that was assigned to the base model. Drag it into our world and reset the position. Now bring in the branch. For this, we're going to change the material import method back to create new material. And this came in perfectly. We're going to organize everything, move the textures to the textures and the materials to the materials. Place the branch into the world and reset the position. Now we're going to go and press this button here and go into lights and add a rectangular light, rect light. Drag that into our scene, place it here, move it behind the opening in the wall. Go back into the Add Actors panel and go into Cinematic, Scene Camera Actor. I'm going to reset the position and rotate it 90 degrees and then move it back. Right click on the camera, you can go into Pilot Camera Actor and that will show you the view from the camera. Now in the camera settings, I'm going to change the film back to DSLR. I'm going to swap the sensor height and width so we have a vertical camera. I'm going to set the current focal length to 80. You click the arrow here, it will stop piloting the camera. With the camera selected, hit this pin icon. Now even if you deselect the camera, this view will stay here. I'm going to disable movement snapping by clicking this icon and then position the camera for a better view. In the outliner, we're going to select bottle cap and we're going to drag it into bottle. We're going to do the same with the label. Now if we move the bottle model, all of the models move with it. I'm going to select the base and the bottle and move it up and then adjust the bottle so the bottle is resting on the base. I'm going to move both objects to the left. I'm going to select the branch and put it into position. I'm going to select the camera and change the focal length to 100. Open up the focus settings, click on the eyedropper tool and select the bottle. You can click Draw Debug Focus Plane to check if the focus is aligned. Now I'm going to go into Add Actors. I'm going to go into Volumes and select Post-Process Volume. Scroll all the way down until you find Infinite Extent Unbound and check that on. Now into exposure settings, I'm going to change min and max EV to 1. In lumen global illumination, I'm going to set lumen lighting quality, scene detail, and final gather quality to 6. And in reflections, I'm going to set the quality to 4, change the ray lighting method to hit lighting for reflections, and enable high quality translucency reflections. Now I'm going to select the light and change the source width and height to match better. I'm going to set the light intensity to 30 for now. Go into project settings, search for ray tracing. Have a compatible graphics card, use hardware ray tracing when available, and turn on ray trace shadows if you'd like. If you didn't turn on ray traced shadows, you can select the light and search for it and enable it manually. You can even change the samples per pixels here. Go into settings and check if your engine scalability settings is set to cinematic. I'm going to pilot the camera and change my lighting settings. Now select the camera. You can adjust the focus distance. By changing current aperture, you can change the amount of depth of field you get. I set mine to 1.8. Select post-processing volume. In the global tab and color grading, open contrast, enable it, and set it to 1.2. Now select your background model and open the material. We're going to adjust the colors. Drag out of the texture sample, search for hue shift. Plug the texture into the texture node, hold down 1 and click and enter a value of 0.91. Now right click and search for desaturation. Plug hue shift into it, hold down 1, click and set the value to 0.5. Go into Edit, Plugins, and search for Movie Render Queue. Enable it and hit Restart now at the bottom right. Once the editor restarts, we're going to go into Content Browser, Maps, and open up our map. I'm going to slightly change the aperture to 1.7. To render out a scene, we're going to go here and click on this button and add level sequence. We're going to go into Assets, create a new folder. I'm going to call it Render. I'm going to change the name to Render Level Sequence. Hit Save. Now select your camera. Come here, right click, Actor to Sequence, add Scene Camera. The red line on the right is how many frames we will render. I'll move it to 2 frames. To check the plugin of Movie Render Queue is enabled, go here, see if it says Movie Render Queue. Click on the render icon next to it. Now to change the settings, we're going to click on Unsaved Config in the middle. Now here we can change a lot of settings. For first, which type of format we want to export in JPEG. If you go into settings, you can see we can find PNG as well. So I'll delete JPEG. In settings, I'm also going to add game overrides. This makes sure everything is set to the maximum quality. Now I'm going to add anti-aliasing. Click on override aliasing and increase the temporal sample count to 64 and change the render warmup and engine warmup to 64. Now go to your output settings, swap your left and right settings. In output directory, you can change where the renders are saved. If you leave it on default, the renders will be saved inside of the project folder. I'm going to hit accept and render local. If you didn't change the output directory, you can find the renders here. Open up the project folder, go into saved and movie renders. I'm going to move the red line back because we're going to make an animation now. I'm going to click on 30 FPS. I'm going to change the show time as to seconds so we can see how long our render is. I'm going to move it to 5 seconds. I'm going to select the camera. I'm going to change the focus method to tracking. Open tracking focus settings. I'm going to select the eyedropper and click on the bottle. Now, no matter how much we move our camera, we will be focused on the bottle. Now to start animating, under the camera on the left, next to transform, click on this dot to add a keyframe. Now move to the end of the timeline. On the right, I'm going to click and drag on the location to change them. Then add another keyframe on the transform. And now we have a simple animation. We can move the keyframes around if you want to speed up or slow down the animation. Now click on Render, Settings, go into Anti-aliasing, reduce the temporal samples count to 16. The more temporal samples count we have, the longer each frame will take to render. Once the render is complete, you'll have all the frames saved as images. Open up Blender, go into File, New, Video Editing. On the right, change the resolution to match the resolution you rendered out in, and change the frame rate to 30 if you had it 30 inside of Unreal Engine. Now in the timeline, hit Ctrl A, Image Sequence, find where all of your renders are saved. Select all of your images, and then hit Add Image Strip. Now on the bottom right, we're going to change the N to 150 because that's how many frames we rendered. Now on the right, make sure the file format is FFmpeg video. Go into encoding and the container should be MPEG-4, and you can change the quality to high or perceptually lossless. The higher the quality, the bigger the file size will be. And if you're not going to add audio, you can select no audio. And here you can set the output directory. And at the bottom, you can name what you'd like the video to be. Go into Render and hit Render Animation. And now we've rendered out our animation. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please make sure to subscribe and hit the like button below. And please comment if you'd like to see more tutorials like this.